You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. And before we start, let me just say, oy vey, my Hebrew pronunciation sometimes comes out sounding like a GPS that got lost in Jerusalem. So if you hear me say something that doesn't sound quite right, just remember, it's not me, it's the AI. Today's topic is the Book of Lamentations. Yes, I know, Lamentations sounds like a heavy word, and you're right. It is. But don't worry, we'll unpack it with plenty of pop culture references and hopefully keep things engaging, even while talking about one of the saddest books in the Hebrew Bible. Think of this as your guided tour through an ancient funeral playlist, except instead of crying violins, you get me and my occasionally goofy storytelling. Let's dive into what this book is all about, why it matters, and how it still resonates today, even in a world full of memes, Netflix binges, and TikTok dances. The Book of Lamentations, called Eicha in Hebrew, which literally means how, is traditionally attributed to the prophet Jeremiah, although scholars debate whether he actually wrote it. The setting is Jerusalem in ruins, after the Babylonian destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. Picture the aftermath of a once bustling, vibrant city, like Times Square suddenly reduced to ashes, or your favorite sports stadium turned into a ghost town. The book is made up of 5 poems, each pouring out grief and sorrow over the devastation. It's raw, emotional, and heavy, describing hunger, loss, exile, and despair. But it's not just about sadness. It's also about searching for meaning when life seems unbearable. In Jewish tradition, this book is read publicly on Tisha B'Av, a fast day commemorating not just the destruction of the first temple, but also the second temple and other tragedies in Jewish history. So you could say Lamentations is Judaism's soundtrack for heartbreak, replayed every year when remembering collective suffering. Now let's talk style. The poetry of Lamentations is carefully structured, which makes the pain feel almost organized, if that makes sense. 4 of the 5 chapters are acrostics, meaning each verse begins with successive letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Imagine writing a breakup poem where every line starts with A through Z. That's basically what's happening here. It's like saying, I'm so heartbroken, I could literally list out the entire alphabet of grief. The imagery is intense. Jerusalem is described as a widow, abandoned and mourning. People are starving. Children beg for bread. It's graphic and visceral, which makes it unforgettable. But there's also artistry here, not just suffering. By arranging the chaos of destruction into poetic order, the book reflects a human need to make sense of devastation. It's like journaling after a tragedy, painful, but also a way to find some shape in the shapeless. This style gives the book a unique emotional punch, equal parts literary genius and soul-crushing honesty. So, why is Lamentations read on Tisha B'Av? Think of Tisha B'Av as Judaism's day of ultimate sadness. It's like the opposite of a holiday barbecue. Instead of hot dogs and fireworks, you get fasting, mourning, and sitting on the floor in dim light. Jews read Lamentations as a way to connect with national memory, to remember that destruction isn't just history, it's identity. In many synagogues, the lights are turned down, people sit on the ground or low stools, and the haunting melody of Eicha fills the room. If you've ever been to a midnight movie marathon for a really sad trilogy, you get the vibe. The book makes sure people don't forget that tragedy is part of the Jewish story. But here's the thing. It's not about wallowing forever. By remembering loss together, there's also resilience. It's a spiritual never forget moment, not just for the past, but also as a reminder to rebuild and keep moving forward. Okay, but let's pause for a second. You might be thinking, why dwell on all this doom and gloom? Fair question. Lamentations isn't exactly the stuff of feel-good inspirational posters. But here's the deal. Judaism doesn't shy away from sadness. Instead of pushing it under the rug, it says, let's sit with it, name it, and give it words. In fact, there's something powerful about having an entire book devoted to grief. It's like therapy before therapy existed. Just like today, when you might listen to Adele on repeat after a breakup, ancient Jews had Lamentations to pour out their sorrow after national catastrophe. It's not about glorifying pain, but about acknowledging it so healing can begin. That's why Lamentations is still relevant. Everyone goes through loss, And this book shows that even the deepest grief can be given voice, dignity, and structure. It's like humanity's oldest version of emotional intelligence training, wrapped in poetic cries to God. One of the most striking themes in Lamentations is the search for meaning in suffering. The poets ask, why did this happen? Was it punishment? Was it abandonment? Where is God? These are questions people still ask today when facing tragedy. In some verses, the destruction is blamed on the people's sins, almost like saying, we brought this on ourselves. In others, there's confusion and despair, as if God has simply vanished. It's a theological roller coaster, swinging between guilt, anger, and longing. That honesty is refreshing because it doesn't try to give neat answers. Sometimes life just hurts, and the book doesn't pretend otherwise. If anything, it gives permission to wrestle with God and with life's unfairness. Think of it as the spiritual version of writing an angry letter to customer service and then ripping it up. You're not guaranteed resolution, but you are allowed to voice the pain. Here's a fun fact. Lamentations isn't just a Jewish thing. It's inspired other cultures and religious traditions too. In Christianity, for example, readings from Lamentations became part of Holy Week services, especially during Good Friday observances. The book's raw grief resonates across faiths because suffering, sadly, is universal. Artists, musicians, and poets have all drawn on its imagery. From medieval chants to modern novels, Lamentations keeps echoing. Even in pop culture, its themes sneak in. Anytime you see a post-apocalyptic movie, whether it's The Walking Dead or The Last of Us, you're basically getting a Lamentation-style meditation. The world we knew is gone, and now we mourn while trying to find hope. The book proves that even ancient words of grief can speak to every generation, because, spoiler alert, humanity hasn't exactly solved the problem of pain. We still need ways to talk about it, and Lamentations gives us one. Now let's zoom in on the most famous line. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Wait, what? A line of hope in the middle of all this sadness? Yup. Buried in chapter 3, you find this unexpected glimmer of optimism. It's like finding a piece of chocolate in the middle of a box of broccoli. The writer basically says, even when everything collapses, God's compassion is still real, and hope is still possible. That's why this verse has become one of the most quoted and cherished, even outside religious circles. It reminds people that grief doesn't erase the possibility of renewal. In Jewish life, that theme is huge. Destruction is real, but so is rebuilding. The temple was destroyed, but Jewish life survived and reinvented itself. Hope slips in, even in the darkest times, like sunlight sneaking through a cracked window. So what does Lamentations mean for today? Honestly, a lot. Think about collective tragedies people experience. Wars, natural disasters, pandemics. Communities still turn to poetry, song, and ritual to express grief together. Lamentations shows us the importance of not going through sorrow alone. It's a group project in mourning. Reading it on Tisha B'Av is less about ancient history and more about practicing the muscle of collective empathy. We live in a world that often rushes past sadness, scrolling away from bad news or numbing ourselves with distractions. But Lamentations says, stop, sit, grieve. And in doing that, it gives us tools to process, to remember, and to rebuild. You don't need to be Jewish to get the message. It's basically saying, don't bury your pain, face it, name it, and let it connect you to others. That's timeless wisdom, even in our world of endless push notifications. So let's wrap this up. The Book of Lamentations might be ancient, but it's also incredibly modern. It's grief poetry at its rawest, giving words to heartbreak while also offering glimpses of hope. It reminds us that mourning has its place, that expressing pain is part of healing, and that communities grow stronger by sharing sorrow together. Yes, it's sad. Yes, it's heavy. But it's also a testimony to resilience, survival, and the belief that tomorrow can be better. Whether you hear it in a darkened synagogue on Tisha B'Av or read it on your own, it's a reminder that human beings have been wrestling with loss forever, and somehow we keep finding ways to endure. Thanks for listening to this episode of Everything Jewish, 10 minutes at a time. If you enjoyed it, or even if it just made you think a little differently, please forward it to a friend or leave a positive review so others can find the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep learning.